Five, six, seven, eight.
So in honor of Sesame Street's 40th birthday, here's some fun facts about Sesame Street for you guys. The first one is that Baby Bear is Jewish. And the count that does all the counting and the evil laugh is over 2 million years old. So he could kick Edward Cullen's butt. And in 1979, on his first season of Sesame Street, Telly was previously known as the television monster, and he used to have an antenna on his head, and when he'd watch TV, his eyes would spin around, and he wasn't all worrisome like he is today. And Rosita, the only Hispanic Muppet on Sesame Street, is actually a fruit bat. I mean, no one would ever guess that. And in the first season of Sesame Street, Oscar the Grouch was orange, not green. Can you imagine that? In Sesame Street's 40 seasons, there's been over 1,000 Muppets that lived on Sesame Street. And there are a few mainstays like Big Bird and Elmo and Bert and Ernie, but many Muppets have been forgotten or left behind. And here's a couple Muppets that you might not know about that got kicked off Sesame Street. The most famous is probably Roosevelt Franklin, and he's my personal favorite. I really liked him. And Roosevelt Franklin was voiced by Matt Robinson, who was the first Gordon on Sesame Street. And he was an African-American puppet who had his own school named Roosevelt Franklin Elementary School, and he often taught the class important lessons about the geography of Africa and how to avoid drinking poison. But anyway, Roosevelt Franklin was kicked off because he was seen as a negative African-American stereotype. I don't think he really is. I thought he was pretty cute. And the next one is Harvey Knee Slapper. And Harvey would take people's hats and squish them with an oversized letter I, or whatever letter of the day was, and he would make bad puns and jokes about the letter and number of the day. He was kicked off. I don't know why. The next one is Professor Hastings, and Professor Hastings would give boring lectures about crap until he fell asleep himself, and though everyone loves a narcoleptic educational professor, he was kicked off because he was too dull. The next one is Don Music, and he was a frustrated musician who would take out his anger by banging his head on the piano and saying, "I'll never get it." And when kids started imitating him and banging their heads, he was booted from the street. The next one is Bruno the Trash Man. Before Oscar just found a way to pick himself up, he had to be carried around Sesame Street by the other cast members until they finally invented Bruno, the big silent trash man, to carry him around. But eventually, Oscar found out how to walk by himself, and Bruno was kicked off. The next one is Kermit the Frog, who was kicked off Sesame Street for a while because Jim Henson, the voice of Kermit, died, and he was replaced by some accountant-looking Muppet named Herbert Birdsfoot. But kids didn't really take to him, and they liked Kermit better, so Kermit was brought back. And the last thing that was booted off Sesame Street was Around the Corner. Around the Corner was a ritzy, cul-de-sac in Sesame Street. It was like the rich part of Sesame Street. But kids would get confused with Around the Corner and Sesame Street, so it was kicked off too. Happy 40th, Sesame Street! Oh, and happy birthday to Steve, whose birthday was 2 days ago. And happy birthday to me, whose birthday was last Tuesday.